Talking about more sculpting, keep working on this project. I'm going to take the base mesh stuff. I'm going to take her from the stage I'm at right now, which is the Dynamesh sculpt, and do maybe a little bit of work on the face before I do a ZRemesher pass and start building out some clothing and stuff. So it's going to be a cool little preview to see how that works. Like I said, next week I want to do a character that's got more facial details, so I can show you how to tackle that. This was actually a challenge for me because I don't do a lot of anime proportions. I tend to keep things pretty realistic. And so it's definitely a challenge to get all that stuff right. Last time we were in here, we were talking about the challenge of how do you get... Oh man, it just kicked everybody out. Well, that's weird. Well, it says I'm still running it. So, what I'm doing here is I'm looking at my head and I'm trying to get the proportions nailed in. And so last week we kind of lamented the lack of any kind of I had a lot of good sketches, but nothing came together as an orthographic view. So I actually just jumped into Affinity Photo, which I use instead of Photoshop, and I made my own. I cut it up from a couple different pieces. I found one of the leg pretty straight that went to the upper body, and then I found one of the upper body that was pretty straight upright where she wasn't leaning. Only problem here is this is an image where her head is leaning back, so it sort of will fake you out, and you got to be careful when looking at your reference this way. So if I look at this as an example, this image, and I looked at her head, I would think that her eyes start where her ears are. So you look at me as an example. If I lift my head up, you can see it looks like that. But we know proportionately it's not what's happening, it's just my head's lifting, and really it's straight on here. She's lifting her head, which is exaggerating a lot of these features and forms. And most of the other images, it's pretty traditional. Ears line up with the head, pretty traditional, like Loomis style breakdown of the head. You want to be careful when you're looking at your reference that you know what you're looking at. I've actually was working with a student on this before. I was doing a likeness sculpt, and it was like every picture of this character looks a little different when you're looking at it. It's like, yeah, because very slight changes in perspective change a lot about how we're looking at it. In fact, perspective on and off makes a huge difference into how we perceive something. The shape feels like it changes. Likeness sculpting, especially, it's one of the reasons I like doing cartoony stuff, is likeness sculpting is one of like the hardest things I think to get right. You have to be paying so much attention. So I kind of took this and I got my little setup on the bottom. If you start working inside a ZBrush and you've got a UI, you've got your brushes laid out the way you want, you can always come into preferences. And under config, you do store configuration. It makes this your default configuration. And it's like I said, it's a nice way to work. I like to just kind of arrange a lot of my brushes down along the bottom. Depending on the stuff I do, sometimes make multiple UIs for different tasks, like if I'm doing hard surface versus if I'm doing character work, versus if I'm doing like hair, cleanup, detailing. I need different brushes and different things. Sometimes people try to put everything in one UI. I prefer to have lots of different UIs that I can flip through on my own because I want just the tools per stage that I'm using right now. As well as too, somebody might notice I changed the colors because I don't like the default orange. Pretty simple to do. You just pick any color from the color picker up here. Don't worry about your character changing. We can always bring it back. So if I want to make it, I don't know, more like, I like this kind of bluish green. I'm gonna go a little bit more green so you can just see the difference. And I come into preferences under eye colors. If I click on any of these, it changes the color to that color. So it's actually pretty easy to change this to whatever I want. So I'm gonna get more back to the colors I'm looking for. Preferences, and there you go. So, and then if I just change it back to white, it switches this character back. It's kind of just previewing what I'm doing. So I got a couple things proportionally that I'm working on with it. Like I said, I did this ortho sketch and I bring it up a little bit just to make sure to double check my proportions are more or less correct, and it feels pretty accurate. The big thing I need to work on now is the head and getting some of the features. So I got one whole piece of my geometry, but let's put some ears into this. So using my insert primitives, I'm going to insert a sphere onto the side like so. I'm going to flatten it. Get it back a little bit this way. I'm going to center it. Let's see, local symmetry. move it, and I'm gonna rotate it. So right now it's all one object. And like I said, keep my brush as large as possible, keep my objects as small as I feel I can get away with. Her ears have like, you know, a real, it's like, again, it's pretty traditional, but very cartoony. So it's kind of got like almost comes to a little point out here. It's the apex of the curves that are really important. It's the read that I'm looking for. Oh, that's my zoom playback thing. That's cool. Let's get this back. Let's pull this out. Lift this dude up. Let's keep rolling with it. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to see how much I can get out of this because I want to get the major shapes. I'm going to use inflate here because it just helps me carve pieces in and away. And then I'm going to use the inflate on the back. Give me that idea of the ears. Like I can't remember what that's called, but whatever is attaching the ear to the back of the head. Again, I'm going into way more detail than is in the concept, but I like to do a little bit more realism even in my stylized characters. When you're doing stylized stuff, there's an anatomy to stylize. There's a convention. It's one of the reasons I don't like when people learning to draw, I don't tell them like, hey, learning to draw your favorite anime characters and stuff can be, or cartoon characters are really fun, but you want to learn observational work. And sometimes picking someone else's style can get you to copy too much of what they do. So when you're really practicing, especially when you want to practice your drawing, I really recommend practicing life drawing as much as possible because your favorite cartoonist did it too. So it's a good spot. I think it's pretty good relative in the head. I want it to be pretty much in the middle, proportionately in the middle of the head. So if I think here's the top, here's the bottom, that ear line right here is right about halfway through. This top line is right about where the top of the brow is. That seems pretty good. So I'm going to unmask it, and now if I stroke again, it dynameshes everything together. It seems a little low with my dynamesh, so I'm actually going to jump it up in size. So all of this is based on scale. You notice my dynamesh, I'm already at 512, and it seems like it's going pretty low, so I'm actually going to scale this whole thing up right now. I'm going to center it, I'm going to line it, and let's rotate it, and I'm just going to scale the whole thing up. And you'll notice if I dynamesh at the same resolution, it's giving me a lot more detail than I had before because it's a higher scale now. So it's I unified everything so that I could use my brush, but I think it's big enough now. F brings me back into the center. I'm just going to touch this pretty lightly with my smooth to get these transitions in. And, you know, her features, like, it's all insinuated. So people often look at this and say, oh, here's a line. That means I just need to come in, draw really sharp, and just draw 2 lines like that, and I'm good to go. Not exactly. I like the Damien standard to, like, separate this rim of the ear, so to speak, like so. But when I'm doing the rest of these shapes, like these here, I want to think about, like, what are these representing? I want the idea that there is always, like I'm saying, I use this term insinuation a lot, like we're implying, especially when it comes to cartoonier stuff, we're implying the shapes more than we're actually creating them. So if there's a line there, why is it there? What's the shape that's making that possible? So I'm actually going to carve out a little bit here, and then I'm going to use my Damien standard to like lift these out a little bit. And it's giving me something that's like a balance between stylized and real. I do the same thing. I'm going to run a little line with my Damien standard just to help cut this in and define its shape a little bit better. Doesn't look like everybody either kind of has like hanging lobes or doesn't. It doesn't look like she does. But if any time I want to come in and add something more like that, the inflate tool is great for stuff like that looks more like hanging. So the eyes on something like this are tough because I want them to be a separate object, but it's actually usually pretty flat. Again, I could technically use like make the eyes this way. Again, this is a don't do this. It's not great. It's just draw them out as if I was drawing, you know, a cartoon character. And it kind of works, but it looks really flat and actually looks really amateurish. We want to avoid this. So I do sometimes use this Damien standard in a way like this because I'm trying to mark out features. I got a lot of images and views of her and her face because I want to get this angle. In fact, this crease in here is really important. You can see how this goes, like getting this shape right. And there's going to be time to fix some things too, but what I want to get is if I flatten this with trim dynamic, something like this, so I'm flattening the shapes, we can see that they angle back like so. They're not forward. That's exactly what we want. Our eyes need to angle back. They shouldn't be flat on. Apes, simians are like that. We're not. And then I can use this as a basis now that I've kind of flattened that in here to get this sense, and I'm just doing really lightly brushing on like I'm using this as a landmark. Kind of what's happening with her eye. This one drops down and then it comes and swoops back up. Again, this is just to give me the impression. I actually think this one's too high because I think her eye comes a little lower. It's pretty large, you know, like these kind of cartoony Disney anime kind of things are. And yeah, those things are related. Anime was invented by a guy who's a huge fan of DuckTales, the comic series, which is also still immensely popular in Germany, interestingly enough. And so his whole style that started anime, one of the original manga artists who did Astro Boy's, name escapes me at the moment, was trying to do a style in that in the style of DuckTales. So, woo. So this is going to be like a basis for what I'm doing, but it's not the final version, and I'm still going to use the rest of my structure. So I know I want a sloping kind of thing for my nose. I kind of got that, but let's go ahead and shape this out a little bit more. And I'm doing this is like if you're doing something in this style, this approach is fine. But if you want to do something that feels like, especially if you're doing a more traditional or Western cartoon character, they usually have a lot more structure to their faces. Especially, like I said, that Disney kind of thing. So often too, when I want to like get a crease, I'll use the Damien standard pretty large and I'll just brush it. And we see the difference of the size of your brush. So really small, it's making creases like this that kind of feel like awkward cuts in. But if I make it really large, it's helping me just brush over and define some shapes, and I can smooth that back out. And you see now I smooth out, it looks so much better. It would be way harder for me to smooth this. So I often use my tools in this scale. Let's get like a spot where the mouth is going to be, and just really drop that in. Character usually has a pretty narrow mouth, and then I'm going to use it in the opposite direction using Alt to sort of carve that out. Again, trying to just define some of these shapes right now. And then I can do a lower lip with something like an inflate. Inflate's great for getting those kind of like lips that push out a little bit. Let's Dynamesh everything just to make sure we have some geometry to work with. I'm going to create this little line, which is the bottom. Again, kind of pulling this top out. Usually has more of a crease, and then the bottom lip is a little bit more of a bowl. Let's pull this out, smooth it back. And then to do this kind of stuff, I like to use a little mask lasso to mask out these lower areas. And now I can kind of push and pull here to get this shape that slopes without worrying about getting the bottom stuff moved. So I can keep them kind of separate from each other. And I can swap them too if I want to get this lip a little bit more tucked up in there. Again, I'm getting a little overboard because I'm doing something a little bit more realistic than maybe this character calls for. But especially when you're going from a 2D concept to a 3D character, you kind of have to invent a lot of stuff. Another thing that you can do, so we know that clay buildup builds up nice round form, but if you carve it away, it does the opposite and it will curve back for you. So I can use that to my advantage by using it here to help me curve this little part of the lip away. I'm not making any kind of a nostril here for the character. Just like trying to keep it, as I said, pretty subtle. And then I could still make some larger movements overall. Like I notice in anime characters, they tend to have pretty pronated, producing jaws that come forward and tend to have pretty sloping noses. You know, how far you push the stylus is definitely up to you. So always checking from as many angles as possible. I might look at this and say, oh, it looks perfect from this angle. But if it looks weird from here, then it doesn't do me a lot of good. I once had a student do a flawless One Punch Man from a front angle, and then he rotated to the side. He's like, it looks terrible now. And my recommendation was just keep it, never let anyone see it from the side. Not always practical, especially if you're doing game-related work. But for that particular project, it was fine. So I can use the pinch tool too to like help me define areas, especially on stylized characters. Pinch tool is really nice. Just grab up areas that we want things to pull together in. I think pinch tool is something every once in a while, every time I really get back in and I do more heavy ZBrush work, I find like another tool that was like, how have I been sleeping on this tool? And I think this month it's the pinch tool. So for a while there, I was like, this is the best tool in the world, like thinking about like inflate a while ago. I was like, inflate is everything. I should do everything with inflate. And now I'm feeling that way about the pinch tool. So I've gotten some of the features here. I want to get the eyes, or at least some sense of the eyes, so I can build something from it. The eyelashes I'm going to build out by hand. The hair is going to be completely separate. I would not build the hair from this. In fact, to do hair on a character like this, I'll show you really quick. I'm going to do an appended sphere. Spheres are great. I start most stuff that way. Scale it down. And I kind of build it like a little ball on top of the head, like so. It sort of fits on the head. And let's turn on symmetry. I usually don't keep symmetry on it for this long. I'm just going to keep it on for a second. And I'm going to go to geometry. And I'm going to dynamesh it. I'm going to keep it pretty low. So I'm going to go all the way down to 32. This is what I was talking about, keeping it low. We can see how many surfaces there are. But you'll see when it's this low, it's much easier to form and shape up and smooth things out and do all that. So I'm going to kind of use this opportunity to build up the overall shape of the hair, which is really easy to do because there's very little geometry to work with. So this would be the basis, and then I would actually even build this big ponytail out of a whole nother piece of geometry. So like I use as many subtools as I feel like I can get away with, especially in sculpting programs, especially when I'm working in ZBrush, because there's no point in keeping everything in one single piece. It's just more work than it's worth. So I'm going to keep going here, and let's go ahead and do the eyes. And I'm going to do the eyes like I do most things with a sphere. Now normally, I'm going to append, I'm going to do a sphere 3D. When we're going next week and I want to show you something a little closer to more like realism, I'm actually going to be using the sphere to make a more realistic eyeball. Like where you take our shape like so, and we actually like push, kind of do like an inflation on this to try to get the sense of like the shape of a real human eyeball. But we're not doing that here because this character doesn't actually have a round eyeball. Anime characters don't. They have weird flat eyeballs. So I still want something round, but I want something relatively flat. Because I want a little bit of curvature, but not too much. And I only need enough to put into the head. Moving it, flattening it, and I want to make sure that it's rotated in the correct direction. Another thing that's helpful for this is this transparency mode, which helps me see everything else kind of at once. And I'm going to put it to a point where it's like inserted into the head like so. So I only see part of it coming out. Turn ghost mode, transparency mode back off. We can see it's starting hitting some of the profile of that eye that we already made. Because that spot's flat. So if this inserts with it, everywhere that's flat, the eye is going to be popping out. And then what I can do with this is geometry. Oh, you know what? Mirrors in weld is not going to work because it's on the wrong side, and I have local symmetry turned on. Oh, that'll work great. Perfect. So now I have this, and if I bring this out, I can use this now to help me shape the eye. I'm going to move. And we're shaping the eye by thinking about this shape. See, I know the eye should be round, so I can use this to help me get the shape I want by moving the head instead. It's going to be much more accurate. Now, on a head and a face, there's generally an angle to what the apex, and by apex, I mean the highest part. So we tend to get like a bit of an angle. This character, they've actually exaggerated it where the apex is kind of in the middle here, which is not entirely realistic, but it's the style of the character. And I'm going to try to follow this illustrator's design as closely as I can get away with. Autosave is a great reminder for us to save our project. So save over it. So if you got any questions as I'm going right now about anything you're seeing me do, or anything you're working on with your own projects, or any ZBrush related questions at all, shout them out. I'd love to answer your questions. So to get like a lid, I can go back with something like my Damien standard to kind of carve in. And again, depending on the character, the lids can be really thin or really thick. In this case, I'm getting the idea that her lids are pretty thin, but I still want to have them. So I'm using all the brushes and tools at my disposal, and I'm often just like keeping it real gentle. Knowing full well I'm going to have to come back in and make some major changes to some things. They have the benefit as an artist of just saying, you know what, I don't really care what happens in here, it's just going to fade out. I don't. I need structure to the whole thing, especially if I was ever going to make this like an animated character. In 3D, it's going to need geometry for the eyelid. See what happens if I ZRemesher it. Oh, not as bad as I was worried about. Anytime you're in question about like what should a shape look like, you know, the real thing is always where I go to and I take a look. Okay, not exactly where I want it to be feature-wise. I think some of my shapes are a little aggressive. So what I'm going to do to get the eye a little bit more I want it is I'm lowering it a little, and I'm making this smaller because the smaller I make this brush, the sharper the little peak is going to be. And that's a little closer to what's happening with this concept. Man, it's steamy up here. I was talking to someone I was working with who said that their AC is not working right now, and that is a bummer. And I feel bad for anybody who's not having functioning air conditioning. So I'm just kind of taking away some geometry here to give me a little spot to help me define the separation between the nose and the eyes. I can put it back, soften it up, all that kind of stuff. Okay, things are in a decent spot for me to do some of my next stages. Ears are here. Things aren't perfect, but they're good enough for where I want to take it next. Because what I want next is to be able to build the brow a little bit here. Where I want to take this next is doing that ZRemesher level so that we can really start getting some detail and some changes and get real polishing. So this is always going to be tricky. See how I've got like rough areas, things that feel like they're not particularly sharp? I mean, I can always come in and take my inflate tool to just kind of pull some of this back, you know, and then I can use my high polish, sort of sharpen these edges, because again, I like animated kind of characters often need very sharp angles to help define where the creases are. Come back in here with something like pinch, which just kind of pulls geometry towards it. Kind of pulling stuff towards it, doing a little relaxing, back and forth between smoothing to relax and pinching to pull things towards. But we see I'm fighting wavy lines. And this is always going to be a problem because like the geometry doesn't go the way I want it, and I'm stuck with this level of detail. This is where I say it's like I'm working too high, at too high of a level to make very, very small or minor changes. And I'm also not able to make major changes. I'm kind of stuck in this weird spot. And that's where we're ready to go up to our next level. Around the characters after that. Okay, so do groups make it have different numbers? No, I mean, groups can help you when you're doing ZRemeshering. But for this kind of thing with the character, I'm going to show you a technique next week about using ZRemesher for that exact kind of thing. But what I do, I just changed my thing on here. This is where I'm going to use the advantage. Yes, so but this is where I'm saying is like subdividing is going to work for you. I would never subdivide this model. I keep Dynamesh and my subdivided models completely separate because this geometry does not subdivide well. Too detailed, there's too much stuff. There's even tiny little triangles in here, which has a really complicated time with. So here's what I'm going to do. I say I like everything else proportionally. Generally, the character shape is what I want it to be. I don't have the hands yet. I'm going to be doing hands separately and showing you how we can attach stuff up. I'm probably going to do all that on Friday. But what I'm going to do right now is, tomorrow's Friday. That's all the stuff I have to work on that. So I'm going to turn Dynamesh off. And I'm going to take this object, this character right here, and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to hide these other two so I just see these guys. My duplicated mesh is the one below. That's the one I'm selecting. And let's turn on solo so you can see what's going to happen. So I'm going to hit Shift F so we can see my poly frame. I'm going to come down here into ZRemesher, and I usually keep a lot of these settings pretty similar. I can start it at 5. I could start it lower than that. I might start it at, no, I'll keep it at 5. I'll show you why. So I'm going to let it ZRemesh now. And what ZRemesher does is it's looking at the surface of the model and it's trying to determine what direction this topology should go. Like right now, it just takes everything like it's putting it through a screen door and it just grids it. Grid, 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 grid. Now what it's trying to do is how can I get the squares flowing over the model? So we see the geometry flows a lot better. It's not perfect. Again, this isn't what I would consider really great geometry, especially not for animating. And there's stuff I could do to the face to make it better, but for what I'm trying to do, it's actually going to be fine. But the big point here is moving or making major changes is a lot easier. And what we can do is I'm going to even go lower. I'm going to hit half on this, and I'm going to ZRemesh this until I feel like it's just not working anymore. Going as low as I can. This is pretty low. And I'll show you why I do this. Because now I'm at like 2,000 points versus my my other model's like at 1,000,000. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna work this way. I'm gonna go to my project. I'm gonna turn off solo so we can see the two of them overlapping. With the subdivided version, not the ZRemesher version selected, if I hover over it, you can actually see it's that 2,800 version. I'm going to do project, I'm going to do project all. So it's going to adjust my low poly version I just made to this. Then I can hit Control D, subdivide it, do it again. Control D to subdivide it, do it again. I keep doing this, Control D, we see now we're up to that 1.83. And the reason I do this in stages is you could just go subdivide, 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 then project, but I find sometimes it crashes, sometimes stuff gets into weird spots. This I find is the most consistent way of doing it. And I keep going until this is close to the value of my Dynamesh that I was at, which was just under 1 million. And so I think this should actually be pretty good. So now what I have, if I look at these two models, they're really directly on top of each other. So let's go back to this one here. And now I'm going to solo looking at it. Oh, this is what I was talking about, like can really go wrong, unfortunately, with projecting and subdividing. Because I got too low on it, so it got a little messed up. I wonder if I can fix that. Not with this, I can't. I'm gonna smooth it, and I'm gonna try doing it from here. This just got messy here. Let's see if I can get it pushed out a little bit. I went too low when I did my subdividing. So I'm going to go up more. Yeah, that's not good. You don't want that. Okay, that's starting to get a little bit better. I'm getting back a little bit of control. Let's see if there's any other areas that... I think that was like my smallest area. So I probably went a little too low. And I'm going to go up a level. Same deal. Let's smooth it out. Inflate up. I'm going to do a project. Go up a level. Smooth it. Project it. I just went way too low on these ears when I subdivided it. Let it go. Control D one more time. Smooth it. And then try my projection. And I know I'm slowing up on what I'm doing. But this is a more subdividable model. And the reason this is cool is you see it's actually going to a lower resolution when I rotate around. And I've got multiple subdivisions to work with. But if I want to change things, like I want to fix proportions or curves, I can go down really low, and it makes it easier for me to make major changes to some of the curves on the character or some of the major shapes. But I can also go all the way up to this point, subdivision 6. I'm going to do one more. I'm going to take it up to 11 million because it's ZBrush and it can handle it. And that's one of the things that's cool about it. And now I'm making really fine marks. And this is how I get rid of, like I was saying, like I can get really fine lines on stuff. In fact, let's go down some more because I can smooth. I can pull that out and go up. So I just go up and down in detail a lot here. So often when I see, this is another thing I see in students when they're first starting out, is you try to stay in Dynamesh too long because it's flexible and it lets you make major changes without really committing. And it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about screwing something up because I can always just Dynamesh it and then it's all good. But you want to get out of that sooner rather than later. There's a real limit to what Dynamesh can give you. As soon as you've got the shapes where you more or less want it and you're now getting to a spot where you're trying to polish it, I feel like you've got to get out of Dynamesh. So now I've got this, and this is a character that I'm now capable of like really putting some polish into, but I can still make major changes to. But this is also cool because this is how I can make clothing. So in order to do that, on a character like this, I'm going to take the model. I'm going to hide this one because this is my backup Dynamesh version. I might do a retopology on that later, fix it up, or do a new ZRemesher like I did before. But I'm actually going to duplicate this, and this is going to be the basis for my clothing. She's got a couple pieces of clothing. She's got the jacket, she's got the shorts, she's got the top, she's got the sneaks. she's got a little band. It's duplicate on both sides, but that's just because I mirrored over something that worked. So now if I go all the way down in lowest level I can possibly get away with, all the way down here, and I'm going to go up to down to geometry, and I'm going to say delete higher. This is no higher resolution. I want to delete higher. So I'm going to, this is now my highest resolution. This is my duplicate. I'm going to take my select rectangle, and I'm going to start getting some stuff drawn out. What I'm looking for is to separate objects. So let's get just where the shoes are. So these are like my shoes, maybe my sneaks. This will be the basis for those. Control W will give me a new polygroup for it. I can hide those now. Let's take wherever I think the legs need to come from. So I can hide, you know, this here. Let's get that out. Let's go select rectangle. Let's do a select lasso. It'll be a little easier for this. Draw it out. Knock it back like so. Took too much. Oh, I hope I don't have a spiral in here because those are really annoying to deal with. I'm trying to get a contiguous loop that runs around this leg. Oh, okay, that's much better. And I'm just hiding everything else, and then I can take this and say the top of the short should be more or less like there. So this is now Control W, like there's my boots, there's my shorts. Let's do this top. It's sort of a sports top, so I think I'll start it right about here. This one's going to be tricky because I want to get it around where the arm goes. Let's see. We can more or less get it. This it definitely has a thin kind of strap to it. Might be a little tricky, but we'll do the best. This draws through, so I'm trying to rotate away from stuff. And then that's not good geometry. This. Well, then I'll show you a different way of building out this part of the body. So I'll take these then, and I'll just build out with the shorts and the things here. And let's build this little bandage. And I'm going to turn off symmetry so I get just one side. Go from here to about here. Okay, so it's one whole thing, Control W. And now I'm taking all this stuff and I'm going to hide all of these. I'm going to go to my geometry here. And I'm going to do modify topology, delete hidden. So this is going to delete all of the hidden geometry on it, so it just have these pieces. And now I can use this to make like my clothing and stuff. So I can go into I'm going to go into split. I'm going to split parts, just like so. So I have this and this. Oh, it split up the shoes. I want to keep those together, but that's okay. I can just merge them later. I'm going to merge down. Now I have this, which is like the basis for my shoe. It generally fits my size, but it needs to be like a lot bigger because it's supposed to be a big, chunky tennis shoe. I'm going to come down to deformation, and I'm going to do an inflate on the whole thing. Really brings up my size overall. The geometry on here is not great. I'll probably start over, but I'll use this as my basis for my overall tennis shoe size and shape. She's got like big, exaggerated, like cool, really cool looking tennis shoes. I like the style of these. Okay, that's going to be the basis for my shoes. Let's get to these. We're going to be my shorts. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to pick up an inflate. We see because we already built it off of some geometry that existed. It gives me most of what I'm looking for style-wise with this. It's a little low, but that's what's great about having my geometry low to start with, is it's pretty easy for me to straighten out some lines, fill things out like so. Get the line of the shorts to fit a little bit better to the reference or the concept. So right now they don't have any thickness to it. It would be pretty easy though for me to just say, hey, intersecting geometry, it's fine. I don't really care that much if the geometry intersects. So I can just take these shorts like so, and I can go up to my modified topology and do close holes. It just caps them off, which, you know, gives me this thickness that I'm looking for. But I try to keep these thin as long as I can kind of get away with. And now, since it's a separate color with my polyframes on, I can see what my overlap looks like. Now this top here was a little bit more complicated. It's got these really thin straps that go into it. It wasn't really working for that. So I'm going to show you a different way of approaching this. So I'm going to go use model here, and I'm going to use masking, and I'm going to use the mask lasso tool. So this now will let me sort of take it and draw out like a shape. And since I'm in symmetry, it's going to cut it both ways. On the back here, right there. Gotta come up and under the arm. I can always cut more away if I need to, holding Alt while I do it. And then on the back, I'm gonna switch to my mask pen because I know like it probably comes up a little higher. And mask pen doesn't go through the model. I take this whole thing and I can come into my subtool menu and I can do what's called an extract. Set this thickness down to like pretty much nothing. An extract is like a preview of what it's going to give me. See, like my smoothness a little bit. Like thickness goes really big if you get it too far. I definitely don't want that. So I know people often like to just set thickness to like 0, and it's just like literally on the surface, which isn't a bad way of going. I'm going to turn off double. I'm going to do this extract again. I'm actually deleting these every time I do one of these. Then I'm going to go up a little bit, just like so, and I'm going to say accept. So now I have a separate piece of geometry that's just this shape. Now, of course, it has this whole topology, which is way too much for me to deal with, because it's got all that. It was coming from like a really highly subdivided kind of thing. But that's okay, because this is what all of these tools that we have to readjust our topologies for. See ZRemesher, what do you give me? I use a lot of ZRemesher in my process because I want to use subds as much as possible. Works a lot better for me. It saves me a lot of work in the long run. Oh, I'm such a ghost right now. My green screen is fading in. Okay, let me go. Try that a little bit lower. And then I'll set it to half and cut it that way. I mean, there's tons of ways of doing all of this, but this is just how I'm doing this one. This one, because it's the straps on are so thin, I'm definitely going to keep one-sided for as long as I think I can get away with before I add any thickness to it. What are you going to do if I do that? Let's find out. 1 second. Let me get this set really quick. Okay, sorry about that. Not quite giving me as little as I want here. But I'm gonna just thin this out and trust the process. Also, not sure what's happening in this little spot, but being weird, that's for sure. So now I have this piece, and same deal, I'm gonna turn off solo. I'm gonna give it a little inflate just to sit it on top of everything else. Ooh, interesting, I have something masked, that's fine. Ooh. Oh, it's double-sided. So my geometry is two-sided right now. I definitely don't want that. Let's do this. What happens if I do this and I inflate it? Will it give me enough thickness to work with? It definitely will not. Well, I'm not going to use this piece then. I guess I could do weld. This doesn't do a very good job though. I should have been, my clue should have been that there's an inside to this. So I'm not going to actually use this one because it's just not going to do what I want it to do. Instead, this should still have my masking, which is good. I should have followed my instinct and turned off double. Give it a little bit more thickness. Let's see what my extract gives me. Yeah, okay, that'll work. Accept it. Now it's still giving me two sides, which is definitely annoying, but I can hide one side of this. So I'm going to unmask it. I'm going to go to my regular select rectangle, Control Shift and click. Now only has the outside part. I can come into geometry and do my topology and delete hidden. So now I have this piece sitting on top of that. Great. Still way too high in terms of my overall geometry. I actually have a couple choices for this. So I was going to go through the whole other technique. I'm not going to do it that way. I'll show you how I'm going to do this. I'm going to get back into Dynamesh. I'm going to let myself Dynamesh it. It'll be fine. It gives it some thickness, but it's going to make it easier for me to work with how like really thin this gets up here. So that's fine for what I want. I kind of like smooth and use some of my other tools to kind of like cut it away where I don't want it. And then I could use something like clay because this is all like a sports bra. It kind of builds out as one piece. Okay, so there's that, there's this, and I have a lot of freedom and flexibility to make any adjustments that I need to it. Just pushing it away from the body a little bit. I think my move I accidentally set it to, I changed its Z intensity by accident. Sometimes I hit this little menu and I accidentally grab something, so I'm going to go up to preferences, and I believe under somewhere in here is like a right click pop-up. I'm going to turn that off so that my right click no longer does my pop-up, because I use my right click for my navigation, and so if I use it for my pop-up too, it can do annoying stuff like that. Moving it, moving it. take this, let's divide it a couple of times. Out. Easy enough to go down in a level and just push it out. Hit it in the spot and then work up levels and just push as I go. How about this jacket? It's its whole own shape. It's got a lot of stuff with it. I'm going to do something pretty similar to what I did before. I have this object I'm going to do again. I'm going to duplicate it so it's by itself. I'm going to turn on solo mode, clear my mask. I'm going to go to here. I'm going to go down, probably to my lowest subdivision. Seems about right. That seems like that'll do. Because I know I need a sleeve, I need shirt part, and I'm going to go ahead and build this out this way. Delete higher. Just like before, I'm getting rid of anything that I feel like is part of the bottom of this. I'm getting rid of anything that is like hands. Do select lasso rectangle. Let's get rid of, I don't need any of this stuff in here. Actually, I'll leave some of this because it'll be the basis for my collar. And then I'm going to just get this center out. Okay, so that's going to be, as you can see, pretty clearly the basis for my jacket. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to delete hidden. Again, that's the best way to delete stuff, is to hide it and then delete it by delete hidden. The ZBrush's engine is a little weird compared to most stuff you might be used to. Now I know I want like the sleeves to be a little bit more narrow. I'm going to start by inflating this whole thing, and then I'm going to do mask lasso to get just this. So this is now not going to inflate with everything else. And we can see like that, how that worked out for us. Now I can play with this like a big jacket, just inflating it. I really don't like this whole point back here. That's not good geometry for me. I'm gonna see what happens if I ZRemesher this whole guy. I'm just trying to straighten some things out because I don't want it to create this same loop through here. So I'm gonna flatten things out so it doesn't think it, because it's looking for a topology when it does ZRemesher. And instead of half, I can do same. And we can see it's going to flatten some stuff out for us. Ugh. Doing some other stuff pretty gross. So I'm going to go divide a couple times. Then let's do delete lower. And I'm going to come into deformation, and if I do polish, let's do polish by groups. Yeah, it's going to straighten a lot of stuff out, and then I can come back into a ZRemesher. Let's see what happens. Yeah, a little bit better. Always looking for the bridge too far in this, but I think right about here is probably pretty good for what I want. And so now I have a basis in the jacket. I'm definitely keeping as a pretty thin object as long as I feel like I can get away with it. I'm thinking about how it sits on the clothing. If you really like doing clothing, I highly recommend you check out Marvelous Designer. It's incredible for making clothes. It's the industry standard for that process. I really like working with it. It's fun. Definitely, like, it's a good idea for any of your characters. Like, I'm doing a lot of stuff based on, like, I've done this before, so I have a good sense of how some of this hangs, but always be looking at your reference. So if something like this gets hard to sculpt because I can't see both sides of it because the back side is invisible, I can always come down, all the way down to our display properties. And I can turn on double. And now I can see both sides of everything. That lets me just get a sense of how much I need to lower it to set it like on the character. Not sure what's happening here. Not a good sign. So anytime you see something weird like that, it's a good time to save. So I'm going to call this dancer. I'm going to say remesh because I ZRemeshed it. Oh, can't use a slash, guys. Not sure what's up with that. That's a graphics driver thing if I've ever seen it. I wonder if my computer's getting too hot because it's so sweltering up here. I'm using this, kind of just build up the collar. Shape everything. My sculpt tools still work like anything else. Even when I'm working on lower geometry stuff, it's just now I'm very conscious of which points I'm actually pushing. I want to get this size. The jacket's pretty oversized for her proportions, and it's also kind of pushed up. Like, I mean, there's a lot of ways she's wearing it. Like, she's down, she's up, so I have to play around a little bit with how I want her to do that. If I wanted the sleeves really pushed up, I can always, you know, literally shove the sleeves up and then take the extra geometry I have here to do some creases and stuff. And the more I subdivide it, the easier, you know, it becomes to put that kind of detail in. Because it's, you know, it's got, geometry should be that distribution just like cloth is. Definitely want to be thinking about what's the crease that helps me define my sleeve, you know, like the seams. Divide it up a little bit, and maybe I just put a little seam or a little crease in here. And then, in fact, there's some cool brushes that people use just for clothing that'll push down one side and push the other sides up at the same time using just like a pattern. I don't have any of those loaded up though, so I'm doing it by hand. But that's not a bad thing to even show you guys how to do, because it's great for drawing through and thinking about, like, oh, where are my seams? Kind of a bomber style jacket, so it's got a little bit of wefting, like it comes out. I got something like a pocket, kind of runs like here. So if you get this, I accidentally hit Shift S and you get duplicate versions, just Control N will do that. Shift S is great for when you want to show multiple views of something. So, turn it back off. Make sure other stuff like my eyes are back on, and my hair and all that. So now that I got this version, I can work a little bit cleaner with some stuff and go back in and make some changes to face. Man, I am not liking that. That's just I'm finding that very, very frightening. Okay, I'm having some trouble here. Things are starting to slow down. I'm just getting a warning about my computer overheating. So I'm gonna cut it there. Work on this some more tomorrow. I'll post for everybody my results on stuff. Not super thrilled with where the face is at right now. I was probably gonna spend tomorrow morning reworking it. If my computer cools down enough to work on it tonight, I'll probably keep it some more. But thanks everybody for tuning in. And, you know, I look forward to seeing what people who are in my class are working on for their animal project. Keep posting works in progress if you have questions or need stuff in the help desk. Here to help, here to answer any questions I possibly can. But thanks for tuning in, everybody. And I'll see you next time.